Welcome to Amazing Authors. Before we get started, I'm waiting for my special guest today, Rachel Michelberg. But before we do that, I want to say, who and what are you reading today? I have this amazing memoir up next. We're going to talk about that and the amazing story behind her journey writing this book. So I'm super excited about you having the opportunity to find out this incredible author. Another She Writes Press author, a friend of mine who, hey, Rachel, how are you? Good afternoon on this beautiful June day.
Well, morning for me, but
That's right. You're in California. That's right. That's right. That's
my coffee, so we're in good shape.
I'm jealous. I'm jealous. Anyway, I'm so excited that you're here and I get to talk about your awesome memoir, Crash: How I Became a Reluctant Caregiver. And hey, Lee, welcome. Hey, Leslie, thank you guys for joining in. This is very exciting. One of the things I love about my show, Amazing Author, and I have to say, what you do, you should love what you do. And that's why I love, touting, getting to know the story behind the story. And that's certainly something that you get to bring to the table today. Let people get to know a little bit more about you and give them more of a reason to read Crash. And Leslie's saying, well-written and fascinating story for sure.
Thank you.
Very, very. We've jumped over the first hurdle. Here we are. The two of us have connected on Instagram, and I'm super excited that that's smooth and effortless today. Lord knows we always say gratitude for those things. But I want to give everybody a background as to who you are, and then we're going to start this party off. Hey, Lee, again. So welcome to Amazing Authors, where the storyteller becomes the story. And like I said, today's story is about Rachel Michelberg. She is the author of Crash. It is a memoir, and it's really exciting to bring you into this space to have the conversation today, to celebrate your important work, because your story might not be, the best feel-good moment in the world, but honestly, I was enthralled. It was definitely, I'm like, oh my God, this is a memoir. I kept saying that to myself. Oh my God, this is a memoir.
Oh, you mean it couldn't have really happened, but
I always wondered, people say that all the time, are you sure this is actually what went down? And I'm like, oh, more true to life, right? Is, the stranger things, actual reality for sure.
I just say hi to my daughter who just
yes. Welcome, Hannah. Welcome to the party. This is going to be fun. So excited that you're here as well. And I'm so excited to interview your mom, Rachel, today. So a little bit about her. She grew up in San Francisco Bay Area and still enjoys living with her husband, living with your husband. You still enjoy living there with your husband, Richard, and their two dogs, Nala and Beenie. I always love the animal stories, so we'll have to get into that. She earned her Bachelor of Music degree in vocal performance from San Jose State University and has performed leading roles in musicals and operas from Carmen to My Fair Lady, as well as the part of the Mother Abbess 3 times in The Sound of Music. And I have to say, that is literally my favorite part about you. I love that you're musically inclined. I love Broadway. I love actors. I love singers. I love people who have incredible talent like that. So I'm fangirling you right now for sure. And when you aren't working with one of your 20 voice and piano students, you love gardening, hiking, and baking sourdough bread. I love those fun facts that you just throw in there and like, oh, that's kind of interesting. This is, in fact, your first book, your memoir, Crash: How I Became a Reluctant Caregiver. So tell me, Rachel, did I miss anything? Is there something more I need to say before we go on and enjoy this wonderful, wonderful moment in time?
Yeah, I'm sure we're going to get to some of these things that are going through my head right now, but as you said, I really was not, never intended to be a writer. That wasn't like my compulsion. My compulsion was to sing and perform, and so I followed that passion, and that was awesome, but then this incredibly devastating event happened to our family. My children were 6 and 7 years old at the time, and my first husband David was their dad was in a plane crash, a small plane crash, which he actually survived, which is pretty amazing to begin with, but he did sustain a very severe traumatic brain injury. The story, I wrote this book because I felt like this was a story that hadn't really been told yet. And it was so, there were other aspects to it in addition to the whole caregiving aspect and my reluctance to do that. But there were, as you know from reading it, there were several other dramatic aspects, things that were happening at the time and during the 3 to 4 year period after the crash, that I felt were a story in and of themselves. But the meat of the story, the heart of it, is that my marriage was not in good shape when the accident happened, and suddenly I became expected to take on this role of being his full-time caregiver, and my health started to fail. My children were in crisis, I mean, as you can imagine, and I just really had to, forgive the expression, but a come to Jesus moment about, for a nice Jewish girl to do that is, we all do it in our own way, right? I just came to this realization of how hard that would be for me to do, and I didn't think I could survive it either mentally or physically, because of course the mental and physical are all connected, right? Very like big time. So I just started writing because I had no idea what was going to happen, and I didn't really. I've been an avid reader my whole life. I mean, I just adore read. I always have a book going. Ask my family. Always have a book going. So I knew what good writing was, and I knew I needed to learn how to do it. So I started taking classes, and 11 years later, I know, 11 years, crazy.
So I have to tell you something, especially for your first book, that's not necessarily unusual. I think that especially a memoir too, with all of that goes into it and that heart pouring out, because to your accolade and to your, to validate the wonderful story you told, you did not leave anything off the table. I will say that. And I think as your audience does pick up the book, and actually it's kind of a nod to them that you recognize that they're giving you their time, and you're going to show up with the story. And as you went through it and as you felt it, and actually it's not far from an opera. I keep thinking about that. I go,
it was an opera, right?
It could have been an opera. It has all the highs and lows and the pull and the drama and everything. So before I go on, I want to give everybody just a little snippet as to what the book is, the synopsis, so that if whoever is here and doesn't know about your book called Crash, that they get a good idea, at least a blip into the screen before we go more into you. I love this. Rachel likes to think of herself as a nice Jewish girl, dedicated to doing what's honorable, just as her parents raised her to do. But when her husband, David, like you said, survives a plane crash and is left with severe brain damage, she faces a choice. Will she dedicate her life to caring for a man she no longer loves, or walk away? Their marriage had been rocky at the time of the accident, and though she wants to do the right thing, Rachel doesn't know how she's supposed to care for 2 kids, in addition to an irrational, incontinent, and seizure-prone grown man. And how will she manage to see her lover? That's, hey. But then again, what kind of selfish monster would refuse to care for her disabled husband, no matter how unhappy her marriage had been? Rachel wants to believe that she can dedicate her life to David's needs, but knows in her heart it's impossible. Okay. Let's talk about, what I decided. Yeah, I love the fact that you went through the whole process of writing the book. But why? What made you decide to sit down and say, okay, this has got to come out?
I've asked that question a lot, and I think it was, the catalyst was, of course, what I did was I started looking for books that told my story, or that told a story about a crisis like that, an accident, and I found books that had described a situation where someone was forced into this situation and then rose to the challenge, became heroic in that they dealt with all of that, and they just kept going, and they did what they needed to do. That wasn't my story. My story was that I knew that I couldn't do that. And so that was probably the main catalyst, is that I just felt like I just had this burning, this knowledge that that part of the story needed to be told, because I believe there are so many of us, we all assume at some point we're going to have to take care of our parents, or our parents are going to need care. And then there are, of course, many institutions set up for that, and far fewer set up for when it's a younger person. And we all have heard stories about someone developing Alzheimer's even at a young age, or dementia, or stroke, or various things. But I just hadn't. I just felt like there were some missing pieces that needed to be laid out, and I wanted to talk about my journey and how difficult it was with his family, David's family, who really were amazing and wanted the best for him. We all did. It's just what that meant were different things to different people, and how they came. They actually live abroad, and they came, and there was pressure, and yet I still understood their desire to have me take care of him. And so there was just this constant conflict, and I felt like that, having been in theater my whole life and having been a reader, I just saw this story that needed to be told.
Yeah, I told you, it felt like an opera. And it's funny because that you also do appreciate the unfolding of opera, of theater, of singing, of song, and the whole musical component. I was reading your book, and at many times I felt a lot of compassion for the whole bunch of you. It's not just one person. It was really, you did a great job articulating the situation through your eyes, but also being able to step back and saying, okay, well, this is happening to all of us. And one of the things I really did appreciate, and I think I wanted to ask you about it, is the fact that there's not a lot of stories out there where the protagonist, offer the reality of the situation. Because if people pull back the veil, it may be more like a soap opera than the other, right? And we all want to come across as being, I'm saying that with all respect in the world, but definitely not to the extent where it's like, the whole drama. But at the same time, this is reality, and I think you become much more empathetic to those who may be doing that as well, going through those steps as well, making those choices. So tell me, what is your greatest wish for the audience at this point, who picks up your book and is reading through your life?
Right. Well, yeah, that's part of what we were talking about before, is that I just wanted to give voice to those people that had doubts about their ability, or I don't think anyone says, unless you become a professional caregiver, but that's a whole different story. If you're a nurse, or or you're a home health worker, that's different than being volunteered for it. But my main message, and really circles back to, why did I write this, was it's okay to consider your options. It's okay to say, I don't want to do this. I know I need to, or I should, or I have to, or we can't afford not to. And that was a big component too, is that, resources, right? How do you find the resources to get that person cared for if you're not going to do it? And I get that, and I acknowledge that in the book as well. But that's the message that I wanted to say to people. It's okay to say, this is hard, and I don't know if I can do it, or I need a lot more help than I'm getting. You know, I need to use my village more to just, it's okay to reach out and say, you know, I can, not so much to focus on what you can't do, but to focus on what you can do, which is, of course, is a basic message we all need to tell ourselves all the time. Don't beat yourself up for your so-called deficits, but say, okay, well, if I can't have him in our home full time with, you know, in our little small home with these 2 kids and going through all these lawsuits and all the doctors and all the, I mean, there was one time when he was home visiting us and he took my car keys, because, you know, I was making dinner and I couldn't, anyway, he took our car keys and he started driving down the street, you know, and he absolutely, that is so unsafe. And luckily our neighbor caught him. But, you know, that's the kind of thing that would have probably happened all the time, right? And so I just really want people to know that it's okay to not, to consider other options. Yeah. It's more than okay, it's crucial. And to consider all your options and to seek out help when it feels like it's too much, because it's almost always too much.
Yeah, and honestly, like, it was hard to put down the book, to be quite honest, because you're just like, you're kind of like, what's happening next? What's happening next? And you really are understanding it from the person who lost their ability to be an independent person, and then also the person who lost their ability to have the freedom to have an adult person, you know, that can make their own choices. And we all know, you have children, I have children, we all know how fun that is, you know, to a certain extent. You know, we're all constantly thinking about the other, but, you know, at that time, it's like, what kind of choices would you have? Now, I want to go back to the fact that this was published in April of 2021. So you've had your year now. How has that journey been for you up until this point?
It's been pretty amazing. I must say, I love, one of the huge added benefits that I had no real idea about was just the relationship with other authors and this whole community that I've now become a part of. This kind of thing is amazing and wonderful, and I love it and adore it. What's hard is that you have to keep promoting the book. We talked about that a little bit on the phone the other day. It's just such a slog, you know, to constantly do it. So that part I don't love. You know, that part is hard. It's like, okay, kind of one more promotion thing. And yet when I'm doing it, you know, when I'm talking about the book or talking with other authors about their books, it's such a joy. So, you know, I'm going to keep pushing forward and doing my best. You know, today I saw there was another review posted on Amazon. You know, I still check it every day. And probably should move it to like every other day or once a week. We're told not to check at all, but okay, that's not.
I point this out. It took you 11 years. You get to check Amazon as much as you want.
Thank you.
That is persistence at its greatest degree, for sure.
Know, and I just want to say for any of you budding authors out there, yeah, it was hard to write because I was a newbie and I had to learn the craft and I had 2 little kids at home and blah, blah, blah. But there was also 2 full years where I just stopped writing. I stopped cold because I lost my confidence. I was like, I'm an imposter. I don't know anything about this. Who do I think I am? You know, does this sound familiar? Right. Yeah. This retreat in New York, upstate New York, and we had publishers from the city come up and talk to us, and they're like, oh, it's really hard to get published, and you know, they were kind of like, they discouraged us. And after that I stopped, but then the book wouldn't leave me alone. It just kept gnawing at me, you know. And so I thought, well, I just have to finish it. Whether or not I publish it, that's another story. But I knew I needed to finish, and I did.
And it's hugely commendable because, you know, sitting here talking to, you know, both of us as being authors, you know, that sitting down from day one until day God only knows, you know, and that last last page being written is a beautiful experience, and it should be celebrated, because the more of us that are empowered to tell our stories, certainly someone out there needs to hear it. So like I said, hugely celebrating this accomplishment. It's so well written, and it's gotten awards. And honestly, the bottom line is, you don't really read from this perspective that much. And I think that that's what makes it incredibly unique. But what I also think makes it incredibly unique is that you continue to hope and dream for your life, for your journey. You didn't stop on that last page. It's not like you went to your closet afterward and said, I am done now. My life can just go on without me. No, you continued on. So tell me a little bit about what happened after the page was done and you closed it, put it down.
So again, I just was, I had an editor who it was encouraging me to get a traditional publisher. He's a much older guy, and I think that was just his world, was traditional publishing. And so the process is you query agents to try to get an agent interested in your book, and that agent will sell it, hopefully, to a publisher. Some publishers don't even look unless you're agented, right? So I started doing that, and I had heard about She Writes Press from some of my writing friends, and they'd been published by She Writes, and so I went ahead and applied through them, and when they accepted me, I really felt like, okay, this feels right, because who knows how long it would be, if ever, I would get an agent. So it felt right. So I went ahead and did that. And then, it was during the pandemic, and it was all the getting ready to publish the book. I had no idea also how much, there is to get ready. So that was actually kind of a blessing, because I had a focus during the pandemic, and of course I could do it all on my computer. So it was nice in that way. Although my launch was virtual, as was most of ours, but it was still great. And then, I was just very busy with the promotion and all of that, and the excitement of the launch and all that. And then I was really pressing myself to write another book. I felt like if I want to really call myself an author, I need to write another book, because just one book, that's not enough to call yourself an author. That imposter syndrome thing,
Oh, Rachel, it sounds to me like it's like the day after you have a baby, and then people ask you, when are you going to have another one? Are you crazy? My eyes are ripped out of my body. Like, my brain is out there in my world. My heart is walking around in this book. And that is what you say to me. It's not possible, but keep going. And
but I have an idea, and I started to do research on that idea, and then I just kept not sitting down to write. I kept not doing it. And I was like, why am I not doing it? And the reason is I was doing it because I felt like I should, not because it was a compelling thing. And I really had to come to terms with that. And so then I thought, well, I'm almost 61. I thought, well, I do have, my voice teaching business is doing great. Like, my kids are launched, well, where am I going to put this energy that I have? And so I decided to volunteer for foster kids, and then I've been working on doing these in-home chamber music concerts in my home. I'm doing classical music concerts, which is, of course, my musical passion. So, that's, yeah. So, if there's a second book in me, I'm not sure I don't know. We'll see. Maybe.
Well, I have to tell you, I love the fact that John Sachs just joined us. He is an incredible saxophone player, musician, who basically had like a part 2 to his life. And I love how the musical ones always show up. The synchronicity is certainly something I never, he's amazing too. And it's interesting. What you just said is really an important, I think, takeaway for many people who are, debut authors, or, they just finished their first manuscript or anything. It's like, don't put shoulds on you, because it might be very painful, you'll suck the joy from what you just did if you do that. And I love that you pointed it out. And, I would love if you want to give 2 more takeaways from your experience now to anyone who's sitting there waiting and listening, you know, maybe considering writing a book or maybe wanting to tell a story and in that respect?
You know, I would say baby steps. You know, when I first started, I literally signed up for a class. I had no idea what was going to come out. And I'm just going to write sort of the one scene that was pivotal in the book, where the social worker talks to me and gives me this permission to, David was about to come home, and had been very ill. And she said, you know, you're not really ready to take care of him. Maybe he should be in a brain injury facility. And I'm like, no, I can't put him in an institution. I can't do that. And, you know, that would be wrong. And she said, just temporarily. And she gave me this permission. And so I that's the scene I wrote first, believe it or not. And
Really?
yeah.
Really? Wow.
And you know, and then I would say join a class. You know, if I think the feedback, the camaraderie, the being in the room where it happens, you know, I could not go there. There's an energy in writer, where the space where writers are, and just say, okay, just today I'm just going to write a couple pages, or I'm just gonna write this one experience or whatever. You don't think about the whole thing. It'll make you crazy. So that's one takeaway. And also, if you do hit a block, it's okay to put it down for a while. If it's meant to come back, if it's meant to be, it will bubble up again, and there will be the right time.
I love that.
Right?
I want to go back to your point with regard to the permission, what you said, that she gave you permission. And I think it's really important that was your first chapter you wrote, because it was as if you were giving yourself permission to write the whole story down. And you know, these little moments in time that become the big moments in time later on when we look back, you know, and these offerings of advice that you're giving anyone who's out there listening and contemplating maybe, you know, doing something like that, you know, writing a book or putting your story out there or putting themselves out there in a different capacity, like John, who's a sax player and he's an electric engineer, changed to be that. You know, when you're giving that permission to yourself, you are giving that permission to others. And instead of the people who come and say, you don't want to do this, but it's the story in your heart that's pulling at you, other people say, yes, but do it at a pace that's good for you and no shooting on yourself, right? And that'll take me to, you know, the fact that, like, once again, I want to congratulate you. And I know, other than these kind of conversations, what has been a surprisingly favorite moment that has happened for you, that you're like just beaming, if that's possible, you know?
You mean in the author journey?
In the journey, in the telling of the story, in how's it changed your life, perhaps?
You know, I'm not sure it's changed my life, but I think, circling back to, I think that people say, oh, you know, you say, oh, I put it all out there. I didn't know. I learned through my writing classes, you got to keep telling the truth. You got to keep telling the truth. Dig deeper, dig deeper. And I feel like, and then people said, well, you know, did you write this as a form of therapy? And originally I kept saying, no, I didn't. I just felt this compulsion to write it. And I wanted to, you know, tell my story to other people. But honestly, it was a form of therapy. And I realized that writing it and really helped me come to terms with all of my guilt and all of my shame, and there's still guilt there. You know, it's still there, but before it might have been 90%. Now it's more like 5%, you know, and that's healthy.
You know,
Healthy. Yeah. So I would say, yeah, just go for it. And even if you don't ever want to publish it, it's very cathartic.
Yeah.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Wonderful. And it is wonderful because 5% is pretty accurate for humanity, like being a human being, you know, is not extreme in any respect. But the bottom line is is that as long as we're alive, we feel these things. That happens. But what I do,
my kids just went and visited their dad. He's still alive. He lives in Israel, and they went and visited him. And there's this pang of guilt, like, oh my God, you know, I could have done more. I should have done more. And yet it is what it is, right?
you know, I think that one of the most beautiful things that you can do, and I think that you have done with your book Crash, is that you honored the story. You didn't lie. You told the truth. You showed, didn't tell, you showed, really. And in the end, you honored the human experience through your eyes. And I think that's beautiful when you give permission to yourself to do that. And then this goes out into the world and it frees others to do the same. And I think that, you know, it takes a little bit more away from the pain that, or the suffering is no longer necessary. The pain will go through quickly when you see it through the eyes of another. And they're like, I've been there. You're not unique. Like I said before, you aren't going to die of terminal uniqueness. There is someone walking this planet that is experiencing the same thing you are. And the beautiful thing about storytellers is that they make the pain less terrible and the healing more accessible, which I think you clearly have done. Like I said, congratulations on that. How can audience members get your book, get their hands on this beautiful thing, and just rip through it as fast as I do? So much.
I've heard it's a quick read. I tried to be succinct. Well, Rachel Michelberg, author, is, you can, through my website, but it's available. I always tell people, go to your bookstore, support independent bookstores, and order it. It's available wherever books are sold.
Your name spelled R-A-C-H-E-L-M-I-C-H-E-L-B-E-R-G, correct?
Yeah, it's bag because it's German, but yeah, people often put an A-E-L like Michael, but it's just E-L.
Perfect. So I will encourage everyone to go out there and grab a copy today. I would more so encourage you to reach out to Rachel and start a conversation. Certainly if that is something that resonates with you, because she is delightful, as you can see. And I also encourage everyone to go check out her Facebook page or her Instagram page, because she does play in the theater world, the opera world, the musical world. And I do believe that music is the sound. Yeah, there you go. There you go. Your piano player. Again?
Climb every mountain.
Climb every mountain. And I think that music is the salve of our souls. So I think that's even more of a beautiful reason to connect to you. I want to thank you, Rachel, for this opportunity to have the conversation. You are an amazing author. I want to leave with maybe one final inspiration from you that we can all take away for this wonderful day after, they go grab your book.
Keep reading. Reach out to your authors that you love. I've been doing that, and it's amazing. They're real people. They love to hear from their readers, and give yourself permission to feel all the feelings. And yeah, that's every day.
I love it. I think it's amazing. I'm reading from my screen here because I couldn't print out my notes, but I do want to say that I want everyone to go to her webpage, Rachel Michelberg, author.com, correct? There's an author at the end of it, correct? And go check her out. Ultimately, after you give yourself permission, realize that books do change lives, and we are always stepping into an empty room where a story is waiting to happen. Whether you grab that pen and start to write it is up to you. Whether you grab your life and start to live it is up to you. Books certainly give you that burst of imagination and creativity, and they make us feel, they stir our emotions. And for those authors who are as vulnerable to the extent of sharing their story with you, like you, Rachel, they keep making a difference in this world and getting us all out there to do our thing. So I want to thank you again. I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and go be amazing. Have a wonderful rest of your day, everybody.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.